Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. I'm in Le Jardin de Luxembourg in Paris, with Palais de Luxembourg behind me. So I'm here mainly to talk about one event which took place here in 1815, and that is the execution, or putative execution, of Marshal Ney. So Marshal Ney, he was a soldier in the French army prior to the revolution. The revolution came along, he embraced that cause with fervour, and then Napoleon appointed him to the rank of Marshal. Now, prior to the revolution, there's only one Marshal at a time, le Marshal de France, as in the most senior officer in the French army, and Napoleon appointed over 20 of them. One of them was even Polish. And these days, I think, well, I don't know if they had any since the Second World War, but up to it, and well, 1950 certainly they had de Lattre de Tassigny, who served in Vietnam, who was Marshal of France. But back to Marshal Ney. So in 1814, that March, Napoleon, he abdicated at Fontainebleau, a little bit south of Paris. That palace, he said goodbye to his weeping imperial guard in their bearskin hats and whispered to them, "I shall return before the violets bloom again," because it's known as Papa Violette to some. And he was exiled to the island of St. Elba, off the coast of Italy. Given 1,000 soldiers of his own to take with him, he could even rule the island. But the following March, Napoleon, he escaped in one small ship with only a few of his soldiers to land at Golfe Juan on mainland France, and he was back. It was before the violets had bloomed again, and then he decided to march on Paris. Louis XVIII was there, the monarchy being restored, and the legitimate government sent the troops to arrest Napoleon. And Napoleon only had a handful of retainers. He couldn't defeat the king's army. He's going to have to rely on bringing them over to his side, and it worked. Unit after unit deserted to him. Vive l'Empereur. And then Marshal Ney was ordered to go and arrest Napoleon, and Ney vowed to the king that he would return Napoleon in the cage, but Ney succumbed to Napoleon's magnetic personality as well and went over to his side. So fast forward, the Battle of Waterloo is lost on the 18th of June 1815. Napoleon flees to Paris, his suicide capsules having failed, and then decides to go and surrender to the Royal Navy in the hope that the United Kingdom will let him live in exile in the UK. Not on your Nelly. He was sent to St. Helena, where he died 6 years later. But Marshal Ney was arrested because Louis XVIII came back. Marshal Ney, remember in 1814, he'd sworn fealty to the king, who rejected Napoleon. Napoleon had said it was no longer the emperor, he'd abdicated. So, having sworn this oath of allegiance to the king, Ney was supposed to obey the king, who was a very senior army officer, but he'd betrayed the king. He'd broken his oath. This was mutiny, a very serious offence. And if Marshal Ney had done what he'd ordered, if he had arrested Napoleon, there would have been no Battle of Waterloo, and tens of thousands of lives would have been saved. So now there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers who'd gone over to Napoleon's side. They couldn't all be punished, certainly not to the extent of capital punishment. So the king said, some of the two people at the top, they do need to be punished, because these privates, they followed orders, they were ductile, and so Ney has to carry the can for those who were easily led, being led to their completely avoidable deaths. So Ney was sentenced to death. So it's brought here to the Luxembourg Gardens, and it's recorded that he was permitted to give the order to fire at his own execution, and then he fell dead. Or so we're led to believe. But there is another story. Ney was a Freemason. The Duke of Wellington was also a Freemason. After the Battle of Waterloo, the Duke of Wellington came here with the British Army, the King's German Legion, the armies of several German princely states, the Dutch army, I'm not sure the Russians came here again this time. They've been here the year before. And two British officers happened to observe the execution of Ney. I'm not sure they're supposed to be here. So there's this story going around that Ney wasn't actually executed, that because he was a Freemason and the Duke of Wellington was a Freemason, they made contact. And Freemasons are not to kill each other except in battle. It's just unavoidable then. So the Duke of Wellington, he wasn't actually made a duke yet, that he arranged for this Ney uniquely to be allowed to give the order to fire at his own execution, and that Ney said fire and then began falling to make it look like he'd really been shot. He just played dead for a bit. The coup de grâce was not administered as is customary, and an empty coffin was buried, and he was allowed to escape to the United States. And there's a story that he went there, he worked as a teacher of French, He used his mother's maiden name. He was British on his mother's side, and that was that, and lived out many years in peace. Not absolutely sure if that story is true, but that is a fascinating vignette here from Jardin de Luxembourg. Okay, that's enough from me. Toodaloo.
Hang on, still doing it.